The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was the largest room ever built by any living species. It floated in orbit above a gray world called Ethera Prime, a planet nobody owned and nobody wanted, which made it the perfect place for diplomacy. The chamber itself was shaped like a bowl, with hundreds of curved seats rising in circles around a central platform. Light came from everywhere and nowhere. The air smelled clean but artificial, the way all alien stations smelled to human noses. Yoon Tae-ho had been sitting in the human delegation seats for almost 4 hours now. His back was straight, his face was calm, his hands rested flat on his knees. Beside him, Han Ji-soo was doing the same thing she always did during long sessions, watching, remembering, recording everything behind those quiet eyes of hers. Earth had been a provisional member of the Galactic Council for 12 years. 12 years of smiling, 12 years of swallowing insults, 12 years of being told to wait, be patient, and earn their place. Tae-ho had done all of it. He had shaken hands with creatures that had no hands. He had laughed at jokes that were not funny. He had signed trade deals that gave Earth almost nothing, because that was what provisional members did. They waited. They obeyed. They hoped. Today was supposed to be a routine session. Trade reports, border updates, nothing important. But when the agenda appeared on the display screens, Tae-ho saw a new item at the bottom. Motion 7781. Reclassification of Earth's membership status. Proposed by the Tessari hegemony. His stomach went cold. He looked at Jisoo. She had already seen it. Pelindua of the Tessari hegemony stood up and walked to the central platform like he owned it. He was tall, even for a Tessari. Long limbs, smooth blue-gray skin, and a face that always looked like it was half smiling at something no one else could see. He carried a data tablet, but Tae-ho knew he would not need it. Pelindua never forgot anything. That was what made him dangerous. He began speaking. His voice was smooth and pleasant and absolutely terrible. He told the council that Earth had violated 3 separate expansion treaties. He showed documents. He showed recordings. He showed maps with human colony ships in places they were not supposed to be. He presented it all with the calm confidence of someone who had spent months preparing this moment. Then he made his proposal. Earth should be reclassified as a dependent civilization. This would remove humanity's right to govern its own territory. The solar system would be placed under Tessari guidance. Human expansion would be frozen. Earth's small navy would be reduced to a planetary patrol force. Tae-ho stood up. He pressed the button to activate his microphone. Nothing happened. Nothing. Above the human delegation, the lights dimmed. Not all the way. Just enough to make their section look empty. Just enough to make them disappear. Grand Speaker Vorath Island, the massive Mirai who ran the council sessions, continued the discussion as if the human seats were vacant. He called on other species to share their views. One by one, they stood up, and one by one, they buried Earth. The Pelori delegation played edited recordings of human wars, the worst moments, cut together without context. Mushroom clouds, burning cities, children running through smoke. The chamber watched in silence, and then someone in the upper gallery made a sound that might have been laughter. A Draenei diplomat called humanity an embarrassment to conscious life. A Tessari trade minister described humans as the galaxy's youngest tantrum, loud, messy, and desperately in need of adult supervision. The gallery laughed at that one. The sound echoed around the bowl of the chamber and settled on Tae-ho's shoulders like a weight. Jisoo was writing on her datapad. Her hand moved fast and steady. She was not writing notes. She was writing names. Every species that spoke against them. Every delegate that laughed. Every word. The session continued for 3 hours. 3 hours of mockery, false evidence, and political theater. Tae-ho sat through all of it. He did not shout. He did not walk out. He sat perfectly still and watched with dark, steady eyes as 12 years of patience and diplomacy burned to the ground in front of him. The vote was called. 34 in favor, 3 against. The Keth Collective voted no. 2 small species whose names most people could not pronounce also voted no. Everyone else voted to strip Earth of everything. The motion passed. The chamber broke into conversation. Delegates moved around, shaking hands, making deals. Nobody looked at the human section. They had already forgotten about them. But Pelindua had not forgotten. He walked past the human delegation on his way out, and he stopped. He leaned down toward Tejo, close enough that his breath touched the ambassador's face, and he spoke in a voice loud enough for the nearby gallery to hear. "You should be grateful," Pelindua said. "Pets are always fed." The gallery laughed again, softer this time. A few delegates looked uncomfortable, but none of them said anything. None of them ever said anything. Tejo looked at Pelindua. He did not blink. He did not react. He simply held the Tessari's gaze until the alien turned away and left. Then Tejo stood up. He straightened his jacket. He nodded to Jisoo, and she gathered her things. The entire human delegation, all 9 of them, stood and walked out of the grand chamber in complete silence. Their footsteps echoed on the polished floor. Nobody cared. They walked through the curved hallways of the station until they reached the human embassy. The door sealed behind them. The soundproofing activated. The lights inside were warm and yellow, like sunlight, because humans always made their embassies feel like home. Tejo stood in the middle of the room. His team watched him. Jisoo watched him. The silence stretched. Then his face changed. The calm, patient expression he had worn for 12 years fell away like a mask dropping to the floor. What was underneath was not anger. It was not sadness. It was something colder, something that had been waiting for a very long time. He walked to the secure communication terminal and opened a channel to Earth. The encryption was military grade, the kind that was not supposed to exist on a diplomatic station. He spoke 6 words. "Wake up the silent tide." Then he closed the channel and turned to his team. "We have 8 hours," he said. "Let us begin." 8,000 light years away, in a building with no name, on a street with no sign in the old city of Seoul, a woman named Kwan Nari was drinking cold tea and watching 36 screens at once. She had been watching them for 19 hours. She had not slept. She did not plan to sleep. Sleep was for people who were not expecting a war. When Tejo's message came through, she did not look surprised. She set down her tea, pressed a button on her desk, and said one word to the room full of operatives behind her. "Gine." Everyone moved at once. Protocol Gine was not in any official document. It did not exist in any government database. If someone had asked the Earth government about it, they would have received blank looks and polite confusion. But in the basement levels of the Earth Intelligence Bureau, Gine was the most important word in the building. It meant the gloves were off. For 6 years, Nari had been planting operatives across Council space. Not spies in the traditional sense, not people with guns hiding in shadows. These were translators, trade assistants, maintenance workers, communication technicians, quiet people in quiet jobs doing quiet work. They fixed alien computers. They cleaned alien offices. They served alien food. And while they did all of this, they listened. They copied. They recorded. Now Nari activated them all. Within 30 minutes, data began flowing into Seoul from 6 different species communication networks. Private messages between diplomats, military deployment orders, financial transfers, trade agreements that were never meant to be seen by anyone outside the room where they were signed. The picture that formed was worse than Tejo had expected. Much worse. The Tessari had not just planned to reclassify Earth. They had planned to carve up the solar system like a piece of meat at a dinner table. Mars would go to the Tessari for mining. Jupiter's moons would go to the Mirai as a military staging area. The asteroid belt had been offered to the Keth Collective as a bribe for their silence, a bribe the Keth had refused, which is why they voted against the motion. Even Earth itself had a plan. It was listed in the documents as a managed wildlife preserve, which was a polite way of saying a zoo. Nari sent everything to Tejo. Then she began Phase 2 of Gine, digging deeper into history. If the Council wanted to treat humanity as an animal, she would show the galaxy what kind of animals the Council members really were. While Nari worked in Sol, something was happening in the darkest and coldest part of the solar system. The Oort cloud was a shell of ice and rock that surrounded the solar system like a frozen wall. It was so far from the sun that light took over a year to reach it. Nothing lived there. Nothing grew there. As far as the galaxy knew, nothing was there at all. The galaxy was wrong. Admiral Park Doha stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Baiko, and watched as the asteroid in front of him broke apart. Not violently, smoothly, like a flower opening. The rock split along hidden seams and folded outward, and from inside, a warship emerged. It was dark gray, almost black, with clean, sharp lines and no markings of any kind. It looked like a shadow given solid form. Around him, across hundreds of similar asteroids, the same thing was happening. Ships were waking up. One by one, then 10 by 10, then 100 at a time. The silent tide was rising. 1,200 warships, built in secret over 9 years, hidden inside hollowed-out asteroids that drifted along natural orbits, looking like nothing more than frozen rocks. Powered by reactors that produced no detectable energy signature when dormant, armed with weapon systems that the Council had never seen, because they were based on alien technology that Baek Si-woo and his engineering team had taken apart, studied, understood, and then rebuilt into something better. Si-woo himself was on Gumho 7, a relay station disguised as a research outpost near the edge of the solar system. He was monitoring the activation sequence and making small adjustments. Every ship that woke up sent a signal to his station, and every signal made the display on his screen grow a little brighter. He watched with the quiet satisfaction of a man, seeing something he had built with his own hands come to life. Doha opened a fleet-wide channel. His voice was low and steady, the voice of a man who had waited a very long time for this moment, and intended to do it right. All ships, this is Admiral Park. You know why you are here. I am not going to make a speech about honor, or revenge, or justice. You have your orders. Follow them. Be precise. Be patient. Do not fire unless fired upon. We are not here to start a war. We are here to make sure no one else does. The fleet moved, not toward Earth, outward, into the deep black spaces between stars, where the hyperspace transit corridors ran like invisible rivers. These corridors were the highways of galactic civilization. Every trade ship, every military vessel, every passenger transport used them. Without the corridors, travel between stars would take decades instead of days. The silent tide spread across 14 of the most important corridors in Council space. They took up positions at the narrowest points, the choke points, where the corridors passed through regions of compressed space that made them faster, but also made them impossible to go around. Within 4 hours, the human fleet controlled access to routes that carried 60% of all galactic trade. They did not block anyone. They did not threaten anyone. They simply parked their ships and waited. Back on Ithara Prime, it was the middle of the night cycle. Most of the station was dark and quiet. In the human embassy, every light was on. Han Jisoo sat at a table covered in data pads and projected documents, her eyes red from hours of reading. She was going through every treaty Earth had ever signed with the Council. Every clause, every footnote, every exception. She found it at 3 in the morning. Article 7 of the Founding Compact. The original document that had created the Galactic Council thousands of years ago, long before humans had even left their own planet. The article was short. It was buried in a section about sovereignty protections that most modern diplomats had never bothered to read. But the words were clear. Any civilization whose sovereignty is revoked through false or fabricated evidence may invoke the right of dissolution, the immediate, simultaneous, and irrevocable termination of all treaties, agreements, and obligations with every member of the Council. Jisoo read it 3 times to make sure. Then she sent it to Taeho. He read it once. Then he smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a man who had just found a loaded weapon sitting on the table in a room full of people who had forgotten it was there. They built this system, he said quietly. They wrote these rules. They just never thought someone would actually use them. He looked at Jisoo. She looked back at him with those tired, sharp eyes. Call an emergency session, he said. 4 in the morning. I want every species in that chamber. They will not come, Jisoo said. They will send their aides. Their lowest people. That is fine. Taeho straightened his collar and looked at himself in the dark reflection of the window. I do not need them to respect us tonight. I need them to listen. By morning, respect will come on its own. The request for an emergency session arrived at the Council Administration Office at exactly 0347 Standard Galactic Time. The night duty officer, a young Pelori with green-tinted skin and very little experience, stared at it for almost a full minute before forwarding it to Grand Speaker Vorath Island's personal channel. Vorath Island was asleep. When the message woke him, he read it with the slow irritation of someone being bothered by an insect. The humans wanted an emergency session. The humans, who were, as of 6 hours ago, a dependent civilization with no military, no sovereignty, and no voice, wanted to stand in the Grand Chamber and speak. He denied the request immediately. 14 minutes later, a second message arrived. This one was from Oren Vash of the Keth Collective. It cited Section 12 of Council Procedural Law, which stated that any full member species could sponsor an emergency session on behalf of another party. The request was legal. The session could not be denied. Vorath Ilan sat in his dark room and felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He was not sure what to call it. It sat in his chest like a stone. Later, he would recognize it as the first small seed of fear. The Grand Chamber at 4 in the morning was a different place than it was during the day. The great lights were dimmed to a soft blue. The seats were mostly empty. The species that had sent representatives sent their lowest, junior aides, assistants, translators who had been shaken awake and told to go sit in the chamber and take notes. Pelindua was not there. He had sent a message saying the matter was too unimportant for his attention. Vorath Ilan was there, because the Grand Speaker was required to attend all emergency sessions. He sat in his elevated chair and looked down at the human delegation with open contempt. There were only 4 of them. Yoon Taeho stood at the front, wearing the same dark suit he had worn during the humiliation. He looked like he had not slept. His eyes were steady and clear. Beside him stood Han Jisoo, holding a single datapad. Behind them sat 2 junior members of the delegation, their faces still and composed. The chamber was quiet. The few dozen aliens present looked bored, tired, or annoyed. Some were checking their personal devices. One Draenei aide appeared to be falling back asleep. Vorath Island activated the session with a wave of his massive hand. The human delegation has requested this session. You may speak. Be brief. Taeho stepped onto the central platform. The lights above him adjusted automatically, casting a soft white circle around him. He looked small on that platform. One human, alone, in a room built for hundreds of alien species. He looked like a man who had finished being afraid a long time ago, and had moved on to something else entirely. "Thank you, Grand Speaker," Taiho said. His voice was calm and level. "I will be brief, but I will also be thorough. The Council may want to pay attention." He nodded to Jisoo. She touched her datapad, and the chamber's main display, a massive curved screen that wrapped around the upper walls, came to life. What appeared on the screen were Tasari government communications. Private, classified, encrypted communications that had been sent between Pelindua and senior officials in the Tasari hegemony over the past 8 months. The encryption markers were still visible. The authentication codes were verified. These were real documents, and everyone in the room knew it immediately. The first message showed the partition plan, a map of the human solar system, divided into color-coded sections. Mars in Tasari blue, Jupiter's moons in Mirai silver, the asteroid belt in Keth gold, and Earth, small blue alone, marked with a label that read, "Preserve Zone, Biological Interest Only." The chamber went very quiet. The Draenei aide who had been sleeping was now wide awake. Taiho said nothing. He let the documents speak. Message after message appeared on the screen. Financial transfers from the Tasari to 4 other species, payments for their votes, fabricated evidence packages, with notes in the margins showing exactly which parts had been invented. A message from Pelindua to the Tasari High Council that read, "The humans will protest, but they have no teeth. This will be finished in a single session." Jisoo changed the display. Now it showed her legal analysis, a clean, precise breakdown of every piece of evidence that Tasari had presented during the vote. Line by line, she had matched each claim against actual records. Colony ship routes that did not match real navigation data. Treaty violations that referenced agreements Earth had never signed. Sensor readings from monitoring stations that had been decommissioned years before the dates listed. Every single piece of evidence was false. And now everyone in the room could see it. The junior aides were no longer taking notes. They were sending emergency messages to their governments. The chamber hummed with the quiet vibration of dozens of communication devices activating at once. Taiho waited until the room settled. Then he spoke again. 6 hours ago, this council voted to strip Earth of its sovereignty based on fabricated evidence, manufactured by the Tasari hegemony, supported by financial bribes to at least 4 other species, and executed with the full knowledge and cooperation of the Grand Speaker's office. Vorath Island leaned forward in his chair, his massive frame tensed. "You will not. I am invoking Article 7 of the Founding Compact." He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The words hit the room like a hammer hitting glass. The silence that followed was absolute. For those who do not remember, Taiho continued, Article 7 grants any civilization whose sovereignty has been revoked under false pretenses the right of dissolution. This is the immediate, simultaneous, and irrevocable termination of all treaties, agreements, pacts, and obligations between Earth and every member of this council. He paused. He looked around the chamber slowly, meeting the eyes of every delegate who dared to look back at him. As of this moment, Earth has no treaties with anyone in this room. No trade agreements, no border agreements, no non-aggression pacts. Nothing. Every document your species has ever signed with ours is now ash. Vorath Island stood up. His full height was nearly 3 meters. His voice filled the chamber like thunder. You cannot do this. You are a dependent civilization. You have no standing. You have no authority. You have nothing. Taiho looked up at the Grand Speaker without flinching. You made us dependent 6 hours ago using lies. Article 7 was written for exactly this moment. You built this cage, Grand Speaker. We simply opened the door from the inside. He nodded to Jisoo one final time. She touched her datapad, and the main display changed again. This time it showed a live feed from deep space. The image was dark at first, just the cold, empty black between stars. Then the camera adjusted, and the chamber saw them. Ships, hundreds of ships, dark gray, sharp-edged, moving in perfect formation through the void. The feeds split into multiple views, corridor after corridor, choke point after choke point, all of them occupied by human warships that had appeared from nowhere. 1,200 vessels. A fleet that was not supposed to exist. "We are not attacking anyone," Tejo said. "We have no intention of firing a single weapon. But as of this moment, we control 14 major hyperspace transit corridors. And since we no longer have any treaties that require us to share them," he let the sentence hang in the air like smoke. He picked up Jisu's datapad from the podium, turned it off, and tucked it under his arm. Then he stepped off the platform and walked toward the exit. His delegation followed in silence. Behind him, the grand chamber erupted, voices overlapping, chairs scraping, communication devices screaming. It was the sound of a galaxy realizing, all at once, that it had made a terrible mistake. Tejo did not look back. The first ship to reach a human-controlled corridor was a Tasari trade freighter carrying processed minerals from the outer colonies. It was a fat, slow vessel with minimal weapons and a crew of 46. When it dropped out of hyperspace at Corridor 9 and found 3 human warships floating in a triangle formation across the narrowest point, the captain did what any sensible merchant would do. He opened a communication channel and politely asked to pass. The response came in perfect Tasari, spoken by a human communications officer with a calm and professional voice. "Good morning. Earth currently has no transit agreement with the Tasari hegemony. If you wish to negotiate passage, please contact the Earth Diplomatic Office to arrange terms." The captain asked for the address of the diplomatic office. "The Earth Embassy on Ethera Prime has been closed. We apologize for the inconvenience. You are welcome to hold position here while the matter is resolved. We wish you a pleasant wait." The captain sat in his chair, staring at the 3 dark warships through his bridge window, and slowly began to understand that the galaxy had changed while he was sleeping. Within 6 hours, the same conversation happened 412 times across 14 corridors. Every species, every ship, the same polite message, the same impossible wall. The effect was immediate and devastating. The galactic economy ran on movement. Raw materials from mining colonies fed factories on industrial worlds. Finished goods moved to trade hubs. Food shipments crossed hundreds of light years to feed populations on planets that could not grow their own. Medical supplies, construction materials, fuel, everything moved through the corridors. And now the corridors had a gatekeeper who owed nothing to anyone. By the 12th hour, commodity prices on the 3 largest trading exchanges had increased by 40%. By the 18th hour, 2 colony worlds in the Drenai Federation reported that food shipments had not arrived. By the 24th hour, the Mirai Homeworld Exchange had suspended trading entirely to prevent a crash. And not a single shot had been fired. Admiral Park Doha stood on the bridge of the Baiko and monitored every corridor through a network of real-time feeds. His fleet was spread across an enormous volume of space, but every ship knew its position, its orders, and its limits. No provocations, no threats, no displays of power, just presence. Quiet, patient, immovable presence. Doha had spent 30 years in the military. He had studied every major conflict in galactic history. He knew that the most dangerous moment in any standoff was not when the enemy was strong, it was when the enemy was panicking. Panicking species did stupid things. He needed his people to be calm enough for everyone. On Gumho 7, Bek Siwu was watching a different kind of screen. His display showed the locations of every known military fleet in Council space. Most of them were scrambling, pulling back from border patrols, returning to homeworlds, trying to figure out what was happening. But one fleet was not going home. A Tasari battle group of 60 warships was moving toward Corridor 6 at high speed. Siwu opened a channel to Doha. Admiral, Tasari fleet approaching Corridor 6, 60 vessels. They will arrive in approximately 90 minutes. Doha's voice came back steady. Understood. Activate the Huanho grid at Corridor 6. Passive mode only. Let them see it. Siwu smiled slightly and entered the command. Along the edges of Corridor 6, among the drifting rocks and frozen debris that naturally collected near hyperspace choke points, things began to move. Objects that had looked like dead asteroids for years unfolded like metal flowers. Panels opened, sensors extended, weapons arrays locked into position. In less than a minute, 47 autonomous defense platforms formed a web across the corridor, each one carrying enough firepower to gut a heavy cruiser. The Tasari battle group dropped out of hyperspace and found themselves facing not just 3 human warships, but a grid of weapons platforms that had appeared from what they had assumed was empty space. Their fleet commander stared at his tactical display for a long time. Then, he ordered his ships to reverse course. They left without a word. While the corridors held, Quan Nari launched the second phase of Protocol Janae. The intelligence her operatives had gathered was not just about the conspiracy against Earth. Over 6 years of quiet listening, they had collected secrets from almost every major species in the Council. Now Nari began releasing them, not to the public, not to the media, but directly to the governments that would be most affected by each piece of information. The Merai government received evidence that their Grand Speaker, Vorath Ilan, had accepted personal payments from the Tessari for over a decade. The payments were disguised as cultural exchange funding, but the amounts were enormous, and the timing matched every major vote where Ilan had supported Tessari interests. 3 mid-tier species received proof that the Tessari had quietly stolen territory from them during a border reorganization 15 years ago. Territory, they had been told, was lost to natural hyperspace drift, a phenomenon that did not actually exist. And every species in the Council received the worst secret of all. A Tessari military report from 90 years ago describing the systematic destruction of a species called the Onuri. The Onuri had been a small, peaceful civilization that had refused to give the Tessari access to their homeworld's mineral deposits. The Tessari had responded by poisoning their atmosphere. The entire species had died within 3 years. The Council had been told the Onuri went extinct due to a natural plague. The report proved otherwise. The effect was like dropping a lit match into a room full of dry paper. The Merai government initiated an emergency no-confidence vote against Vorath Ilan within hours. 2 species that had been loyal to Tessari allies for decades immediately broke their alliance agreements and began moving warships to their borders. The Drenai Federation issued a formal demand for an investigation into the Onuri extinction. 6 smaller species, terrified that they might be next, sent emergency envoys directly to the human fleet, begging for individual peace agreements. The Council did not just crack. It shattered, like something that had been held together by lies, and was now meeting the truth for the first time. On Ithara Prime, Pelindua sat alone in his quarters. His communication terminal was filled with messages from the Tessari High Council, demands for explanations, threats of criminal investigation, orders to return home immediately. He read them all and answered none of them. Outside his window, he could see the lights of the Grand Chamber. It was fully lit now, despite the late hour. Emergency meetings were happening in every delegation's quarters. The station buzzed with fear and confusion and rage. Back in the human embassy, Taiho received updates from Nari, from Doha, from Siwu. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. The corridors were held, the intelligence was spreading, the council was tearing itself apart, and humanity had not fired a single weapon, broken a single law, or told a single lie. He called his team together and looked at their tired, determined faces. "No celebrations," he said. "No victory speeches. No statements to the media. What we are doing is not revenge. The galaxy made an error. We are showing them the error. Nothing more." Han Jisoo looked at him with those exhausted, sharp eyes. "They are going to want to negotiate." "Yes," Taeho said. "And when they do, we will be ready. But we wait for them to come to us. We do not ask. We do not beg. We do not suggest. We wait." He sat down in his chair and folded his hands in his lap. "We are very good at waiting," he said quietly. "They should know that by now." 72 hours after the humiliation, the Grand Chamber was full. Not half full, not mostly full. Every single seat was occupied. Every species had sent their highest representative. Presidents, prime ministers, council elders, military commanders. The most powerful beings in the galaxy sat in that bowl-shaped room and waited in a silence so heavy it felt like gravity. The gallery above was packed with observers, journalists, and diplomats who could not find seats below. For the first time in council history, the session was being broadcast live to every member world. Billions of beings across hundreds of planets watched their screens and held their breath. The chamber looked different than it had 3 days ago. The lights above the human delegations section were fully on, brighter than any other section in fact, because someone in the station's maintenance crew had quietly adjusted them during the night. It had simply happened. Vorath Island's elevated chair was occupied by a new Merai representative, a smaller, older female named Sorath Uen, who had been appointed after Island was removed by his own government in a no-confidence vote that had passed with 93% support. Sorath Uen sat with her hands folded and her eyes down. She did not look like a leader. She looked like someone who had been given a broken thing and told to fix it. Helun Dua was present. He had been ordered to attend by the Tasari High Council, who wanted him visible so they could publicly distance themselves from his actions. He sat in his delegation's front row, flanked by 2 Tasari security officers. His face was gray. His smooth confidence was gone, replaced by the hollow look of a man watching his own destruction approach in slow motion. Orin Vash of the Keth Collective had been asked to open the session, since both the Grand Speaker's office and the Tasari were compromised. He stood on the central platform, a short, broad being with rough brown skin and small black eyes that held a quiet intelligence. He spoke simply. "We are here because we forgot what fairness looks like. We let power replace principle. We let convenience replace truth. And when one species tried to remind us, we laughed at them." He paused. "One species remembered what the rest of us forgot. I think we should listen to them now." He stepped down. The chamber waited. Yun Taeho stood up. He buttoned his jacket, the same dark jacket, cleaned and pressed. He walked to the central platform the same way he had walked to it dozens of times over 12 years. Steady steps, straight back, calm face. But something was different now. The last time he had stood here, the lights above him had been dimmed to make him invisible. Now every light in the chamber was pointed at him, and every eye in the galaxy was watching. He did not begin with anger. He did not begin with accusations. He began with a story. 12 years ago, I was chosen to represent Earth in this chamber. I was told that the galaxy was a community, that if we were patient, if we were respectful, if we followed the rules, we would earn our place among you. I believed this. I spent 12 years believing it. His voice was quiet, but carried perfectly in the acoustics of the chamber. I shook hands I did not want to shake. I signed deals that were unfair, because I was told this was the price of membership. I sat in this room and listened to insults about my species, and said nothing, because I believed that silence was the cost of peace. He looked around the chamber. Some delegates met his eyes. Many did not. 3 days ago, I learned the truth. There was no place being held for us. There was never going to be a place. We were tolerated because we were useful. And the moment someone decided we could be more useful as property than as partners, every principle this council claims to stand for disappeared in a single vote. He let that sit for a moment. But I am not here to talk about what you did to us. You know what you did. The evidence is public. The galaxy has seen it. I am here to talk about what happens next. He touched the podium's controls, and the main display activated. But instead of intelligence files or fleet positions, it showed a simple document, clean text on a white background. This is not a list of demands, Tejo said. It is a proposal. Earth does not want to rule the galaxy. We do not want revenge. We do not want to replace one broken system with another. We want a system that works. For everyone. He went through it point by point. Not as orders, but as ideas. Earth would rejoin the Council. Not as a provisional member, but as a full sovereign power with permanent standing. The dependent civilization classification would be abolished permanently. No species would ever be stripped of its sovereignty again through a simple majority vote. An independent judiciary would be created, separate from the Council's political structure, with the authority and the resources to investigate violations and enforce accountability. And every species involved in the conspiracy against Earth would face formal proceedings. Not punishment decided in back rooms, but transparent justice conducted in the open. The chamber listened. Nobody interrupted. Nobody laughed. When he finished explaining the proposal, Tejo turned off the display. He reached into his jacket pocket and took out a small data chip. A simple black rectangle no bigger than his thumbnail. This contains everything, he said. Every secret our intelligence service collected. Every classified communication. Every buried crime. Every hidden shame. He held it up so the chamber could see it. We could have used this to destroy each of you individually. We could have leaked it piece by piece over years, playing you against each other until the council collapsed entirely. Some of my advisors recommended exactly that. He set the chip on the podium. Instead, we are giving it to you, all of it, freely, because we do not want a galaxy built on blackmail. We want a galaxy built on the understanding that secrets are dangerous, that lies eventually surface, and that the only real safety comes from being honest enough that you have nothing to hide. The silence in the chamber was so complete that he could hear the soft hum of the station's life support systems. 12 years ago, we came here with open hands. You answered with contempt. We could have answered with fire. We chose instead to answer with the truth. He paused, and his voice dropped slightly, not for drama, but because he meant what he said next, more than anything else. And the truth burned hotter than any weapon we could have built. He stepped back from the podium. Oren Vash called the vote. It was not a complicated vote. Accept the proposal or reject it. There was no debate. There was no discussion. Every delegate knew that the human fleet still controlled the corridors, that the intelligence was still being distributed, and that the galaxy was watching them live. But more than that, more than the fear, more than the pressure, most of them knew that the human was right. The system was broken. It had been broken for a long time. They had just been too comfortable to fix it. The vote was unanimous. Tejo walked back to his delegation. The chamber remained silent. Not the hostile silence of 3 days ago. Something that felt like the quiet after a storm. When the air is clean, and everything is wet, and the world looks slightly new. He sat down next to Han Jisoo. She was looking at the datapad in her hands, the same pad she had used to find Article 7 in the middle of the night. Her eyes were bright. "Do you think they will actually change?" she whispered. Tejo leaned back in his chair. He watched the chamber. The chastened faces, the careful movements, the nervous glances between delegations that had been allies yesterday and were now something uncertain. He saw Pelendua being escorted out by his own security, head down, shoulders bent. He saw Soroth Uen sitting very still in the Grand Speaker's chair, looking like someone who had been given an enormous responsibility. He saw Orin Vash of the Keth nodding slowly to himself, as if confirming something he had always believed, but never been able to prove. "No," Tejo said quietly. "Not all of them. Not completely. But now they know what happens when they don't. And sometimes, that is enough." Jisoo closed her datapad and set it on her lap. "What do we do now?" Tejo looked at her, and for the first time in 3 days, something close to warmth crossed his face. Not a smile, not quite, but something that lived in the same neighborhood. "Now," he said, "we go home." 1 year later, a Kef military scholar published a paper on fleet tactics that included a new term. It described a specific formation, a three-dimensional encirclement pattern designed to control hyperspace transit corridors without firing a shot. The scholar named it the Tejo Line. The name was adopted by every military academy in the galaxy within months. Humanity never used the formation again. They never needed to.